We're trying something a little different today. Instead of having two microphones on me, I have just one. So we're hoping this works both for the speakers here and for the taping that's being done. I want to start off by basically reading a statement, which is a slightly different version of what I read at the board meeting last night. So if some of you at the board meeting, it's going to be somewhat of a repeat. Then we're going to go through some slides to discuss what we're going to be reviewing today and a process that will start today. But first, I'd like to read this statement. Over the last 4 years, Santa Fe Community College has made tremendous strides. Our graduation rate has increased from 11% to over 20%. The college and our students have received numerous awards and recognitions. Most recently, the AACC 2017 Climate Leader Award at their national convention. 3 of our students placed in the New Mexico Skills USA competition. 2 will be going to nationals. And tonight we'll be recognizing a number of students at the Student Writing Awards celebration. We've attained these accomplishments and many more through the hard work of our faculty and staff and through the determination of our students. And we've done this in the last few years during times of declining funding. Now, as we prepare our FY18 budget with many uncertainties, it is imperative that we stay focused on our students and meeting our community's needs. Our primary efforts need to be on supporting those students who are seeking a degree or a certificate leading to new employment, advancement in their career, or for transfer to complete a bachelor's degree. The college eliminated several non-academic programs and positions as a result of a financial situation or shortfall in 2014. Over the past 5 years, we've flattened the organizational structure, eliminating 1 vice president, 1 associate vice president, and 2 deans. We've restructured departments and reassigned duties when positions become vacant. We've become much more efficient at what we do by making better use of our IT systems and other systems, and we've implemented cost savings through the use of renewable energy and improved contract negotiations. Earlier this year, we took a 5% reduction in state funding, and we've been cut over 8% now in 2 years, with more coming. Non-academic staff members took on more responsibilities this year as vacancies were not filled. Once again, we've had to identify vacancies that are going to remain vacant and a few positions that may need to be eliminated through a reduction in force. But in spite of all these implementations in the past 2 years, we've had to ask students to increase what they pay for tuition and fees. And last night, the governing board had to raise tuition and fees once again. Over the last 3 years, we have raised tuition and required fees by 28%. That's a big impact on our students. Now it's time for us to review our academic programs and other college programs and make some tough decisions. We're going to share an analysis today that was shared at the board meeting last night that I'm going to ask through shared governance for everybody to review and to make recommendations through the shared governance process based upon what you think the data is telling you. I'm going to go ahead and step into the proposal or the presentation now. Here's what we're going to go through on the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about bar number 2, which is our budget adjustment request for this fiscal year. So remember, the fiscal year is the year ending June 30th. So FY17 is the year ending June 30th, 2017. That's the current year we're in. FY18 is the year ending June 30th, 2018, which will be next fiscal year. So we're going to talk about what is in the budget adjustment for this year that the board did approve last night. Then we're going to talk about issues related to next year's budget, including the declaration of a bona fide financial emergency. We'll review our base budget, our starting point, our budget challenge that's facing us and some of the options for consideration, and then we'll look at that analysis of academic programs. So bar number 2 It reflects the reduction in state funding that we already had to do. We had to do a first budget adjustment at the end of November. It was required by the state. So that's in there. But we've also now had to adjust for our beginning fund balances that we don't know what they are until our financial audit is complete. It was not completed and approved by the state auditor until January, and the board accepted that report so that it includes now our beginning balance. Before in our financials, it was an estimate. Now it's the actual number for in the year ending last June 30th. And then we've adjusted our revenues to reflect what's actually happened this year. Tuition's been up a little bit. The mill levy has been up just a little bit. Some of our other income, which is really small in comparison to everything else, is up a little bit. State funding is down. It's down 8%. And then we've also had to look at our expenditures because we have to adjust our expenditures because we cannot go over our expenditures in our final budget. Revenues can go over, but expenditures cannot. It's an audit finding. So we've made those adjustments, and we've had to do some transfers in and out of instruction in general for public service and for auxiliaries where needed. So that was approved last night. So we're in shape for the balance of this year. So let's talk about the bona fide financial emergency. There is so much uncertainty right now. If you haven't read the newspaper or watched the news, you've missed a lot. The governor vetoed all funding for higher education and all funding for the legislature. So we do not know what our funding from the state is going to be for next year. We will get funding eventually. The question is when, and then secondly, how much? So the odds are that we will take a cut of somewhere around 5 to 7%. That is pretty much everybody's expectation that I talk to across the state, but we don't know exactly what it is. Because of all those uncertainties and because of the need to make decisions between now and July 1st so that we can really have things in place to start the fiscal year, but also if anything's going to impact the fall schedule, we need to make those decisions now. So I did ask the board to consider. They did approve declaring a financial emergency through the month of August. We'll review it at that point in time and either let it expire or go forward. And I did so because we may need to make some decisions really quickly that we don't know what they are. We will be trying to follow everything that is specified in policy. It's just it may get shortened, and we may need to do some things that don't follow policy. We ran out of time. I did not get a chance to speak to the shared governance group about the request for a declaration before taking it to the board, but it is on the agenda for Governance Council tomorrow. So it's just something that we've had to put in place just in case we make decisions because we don't know what's facing us. Okay. So let's talk about what is our base budget that we're starting with. We're basically starting with that final budget adjustment for this year. We have some additions that we have built into that budget and some deletions we've taken out of that budget. And I'm going to show you the numbers that shows where we are, where we need to get to be, and what are some of those options for getting us there. We have not decided on all of the steps we have to take. The board did not approve a budget for FY18 last night. I asked them to table it, and we are going to come back in a special meeting on May 10th to hopefully approve a budget. Okay. So let me talk to you about what are the additions to the base budget. These are new things going in this year, next year's budget that were not officially in this year's budget. They weren't budgeted in this year's budget, or they are new. We've had over $48,000 of need requests related to accreditation. The primary one here is for the college as a whole. Every so often in part of our 8-year cycle, we have to attend what is known as a strategy forum, and we have to send a team of people to that strategy forum. That's going to be fairly costly, and we have to do it this next fiscal year. In fact, it's most likely happening this fall. We have a couple of programs, dental and the simulation lab. They're going for program accreditation. And we also have the automotive program, which is not on here, who's also going for accreditation. So we have to include some of those expenses in the budget. We've been very successful in our IBEST program of working with students who are working on their high school equivalency and in some cases developmental work, and allowing them to be in a college level certificate program where there's a job at the end. It's been very successful. It's been primarily grant funded in the past. We need to keep that going because it's producing graduates, it's producing students ready for the workforce. They're being very successful. So we really need to cover what's been in a grant before and is coming out of it, and that's what we're doing with the IBEST program. Just to let you know, the extra cost there is that you have an extra instructor in most classes. So you have the basic skills instructor, whether it's applied math, reading skills, writing skills, working with the content instructor at the same time in the same classroom. Our medical assisting director, when we hired them for a variety of reasons, we had to do a 9-month contract. That needs to be a 12-month position, so we need to adjust that. We've talked many times about distance learning is the key to our future, but we're doing it right now. We do not have enough staff in our distance learning office to do everything we need to do. So we would like to hire a director and bring in at mid-year a quality matters manager. We've talked about this in numerous settings, over the past couple of years. We actually may be able to do the quality matters person for a whole year because we have a grant that may cover half of it. Distance learning is part of our future. We have got to figure out how we get more students. We need more enrollments, more students paying tuition, so that we can offer programs both for local students, but we sometimes don't have enough to make a program go. And if we can recruit some out-of-state students through online courses, we can do something with that. So there's about just over 120,000 there. We've got 3 lab techs, and they're really, 2 of them were already being budgeted because we were using the temporary pool, but we needed to make them budgeted positions. Those are in film and in the sustainable technologies area. And then we need a 3rd lab tech. We need somebody in the culinary arts courses to really help us with our inventory issues over there. And so we're actually going to use a faculty position that was frozen this past year, so it was out of the budget for this year, because the culinary arts folks have said they can cover the classes with adjunct faculty, and they really need the lab tech. So that's about a cost of $23,000 new dollars. The automotive program has expanded. We finally found a location. We have a lease, so we've got a budget for that and their supplies. I'd like to increase the number of student ambassadors because we're calling on them to do more and more things around the college, and they're actually backing us up in many areas. So if possible, I'd like to increase the number of student ambassadors by 10. Our insurance is going up on the property and casual side, which is really our liability insurance for the college. That's going up $4,000 next week. The healthcare insurance is going up. That increase is going to impact everybody an employee that has insurance more than it is the college. The college, we feel we're going to be able to absorb that increase in the 33% we budget for fringe benefits right now. So we don't think we have to worry about that this year. But each of you, if you're on our insurance plans, knows that the rate has gone up about 3%. We do share that between the employer and the employee, but your deductibles have gone up as well as your co-pays have gone up. And of course, it depends on which plan you're in about that. We're increasing our legal budget. We had decreased it from what it had been for a number of years, but for a variety of issues that are going on right now, we need to boost it back up to where it used to be, so that's $50,000. And then we have, I think it's 6 positions that are being either fully or partially funded on a grant. I think most of them may be in the TACT grant, that we need to keep those positions. So we're pulling those positions into the institutional budget. That cost is just right around $84,000. And then if we're going to have an election this next year to approve either a capital bond measure and or a request to increase our operating mill levy, we will have to pay for that election. And it'll be a standalone election, so we estimate it would cost us $75,000. So we've built all of these new dollars into the base budget. Okay? What we've taken out of the base budget to start next year is 7 positions that are either vacant now due to a retirement or will become vacant because somebody has let us know they're retiring. You may not know they're retiring yet, but we know that they're retiring. So we're going to freeze those positions for right now and not fund those positions in the budget. So from an FTE standpoint, it's 1.75 full-time faculty positions and 4.5 staff positions. So just to remind everybody, or let everybody know what the board did approve last night. We did approve the tuition and fees for next year. We did increase in-state and in-state out-of-district tuition by $1 per credit hour, but we increased out-of-state tuition by $30 per credit hour. So out-of-state tuition is now going to $143, and we are waiving the first 6 hours. We do not have to waive the first 6 hours. What has happened in the past, if you took 6 or fewer hours, you paid the in-state rate. And if you went to 7 or more, it went up to the out-of-state rate for all credit hours. We're just going to charge $143 per credit hour, whether it's 1 credit hour or 20 credit hours for out-of-state students. Okay, we're going to keep an eye on that and see what that increase does. We looked yesterday at the board sessions. We compared our out-of-state tuition both to other institutions in New Mexico and to surrounding states and to the national, and we're way below, and we're still way below the average, even at the 143 rate. So we need to get that set up before we really start recruiting more out-of-state online students, which we plan to do. On the required fees that everybody pays, we increased the service fee by $1, so it's now $7 per credit hour. The student government and student activity fees stayed the same. The technology fees stayed the same. And then a couple of program-specific fees that the board approved last night. One is to increase the fitness center fee from $75 to $100. That's per semester. You only pay it once. If you take 1 course or you take 10 courses, you only pay it once. And we've decided to institute an art facility fee because as we analyzed the students in the art programs as well as the expenses to run the art programs, we felt we needed to institute a fee of $25 per lab course. It doesn't apply to the like art history classes, to the lab courses. So that'll be $25 on top of any other fee that may already be there. So it's really an art facility fee. And that's going to be applied to every art lab course except fine woodworking. And that's because fine woodworking already built it into their revised fees on their course syllabi. Okay, so they have already taken care of that for themselves. So that's what we have done that's impacting our students directly. And as I said, over 3 years, we have increased tuition and fees by 28%. The board also approves the compensation packages, for next year. And basically, there's no change in compensation. We have less money, so unfortunately, the faculty salary schedules remain the same, both for full-time and adjunct. There will be no step increases for full-time faculty, not at step 10 this next year. And on the staff, there's really no change in the matrix or the miscellaneous wage and salary schedule, except we have to increase our minimum wage from $10.91 to $11.09. That is the minimum wage down in Santa Fe. So that's the minimum wage on the miscellaneous wage and salary schedule. And on the staff salary matrix, grades 6 and 7 had to be adjusted to recognize this change in the minimum wage and adjusting the midpoint. So minimal change for really everybody except students who are getting a raise of about 18 cents per hour. So let's talk about what the budget challenge is, both now and going into the future. We got a big challenge with state funding. What our budget is for FY18, how much cut we're going to take is unknown. The legislature has filed suit against the governor challenging her veto of all funding for higher education and all funding for the legislature. They're trying to get that veto overturned. The hearing in front of the Supreme Court is scheduled for May 15th. but they won't make a decision that day. So we don't know how long it's going to take for them to make a decision. And even if they overrode the veto, and we could assume what was originally passed by the legislature in our budget, we know it would have to be cut further because there will be a budget deficit and they cannot legally operate with a budget deficit. So they will have to come back and somehow come up with additional cuts to get the state budget in balance and rebuild the state's reserves. So I have very little hope that the amount that was appropriated for Santa Fe Community College and House Bill 2 will become reality. Okay? It's going to be something less than that. Then the problem is going forward into the future. We don't know when the state revenues are really going to turn around. We have an administration who refuses to approve any new revenues, and so this governor is in office for one more legislative session, so we have 2 more years where the odds of getting new revenue to provide extra funds for those of us who depend upon state appropriations is minimal. And even when it does start coming back and the economy starts coming back and the state revenues start coming back, they never restore your funding right away, and they very seldom ever restore it fully. So we have got to plan that we're not going to see increases in state revenues over the next few years. Excuse me. We've also got to build our reserves. You know, I hear people say, "Oh, you got $6 million in the bank. What's the problem?" The problem is it takes a lot of money to run this institution. Every payroll is $1.2 million. Every month has 2 payrolls, and twice a year we have 3. We still have to pay our operating expenses. We have supplies, we have utilities, we have insurance, we have all those kind of things. So what we have now will continue to dwindle until we get the next influx of our local mill levy appropriation in June. And then that'll keep dwindling until we get to our next local mill levy appropriation in December. So we have this cash flow challenge. And there are times of the year when we have a lot of cash. There are other times of the year when we don't have much, but we budget for what we're going to spend. What we have in reserves is money that we have not budgeted. All we have in reserves at the present time is enough money for 1.5 payrolls. That's not enough. We really should have in reserves enough money to cover 3 months worth of all operating expenses, payroll and other bills. And so that would be at least 6 payrolls. We've been rebuilding our reserves over the last 3 years. We need to continue to rebuild them. It's going to take a long time to get up to what our target is. But we've got to keep doing it. We never know when something's going to happen. If the state, like many other states, was to have no budget come July 1st, we would not have enough money to last past September. Okay. Other states, colleges have been able to go out and borrow money. In New Mexico, we are prohibited from borrowing money. So we've got to build up our reserves. I'm not saying this to scare anybody because we're not going to miss a payroll. But should something happen in New Mexico like has happened in Pennsylvania or like has happened in Illinois, and they don't approve a budget, we have no state dollars coming in for a period of time, and you don't know how long that's going to be. And I haven't heard the news today, but the same thing could be happening with the federal government. They could be closing down on Saturday. Usually I get the little news briefs if they've approved something big like that. So, you know, we have grant-funded programs with federal funds that are of a concern to us. Because how do we keep paying those bills if we have no federal funds to draw down for an unknown period of time? So it's a real challenge. But we've got a plan in place, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The other challenge we have is we've got to structure the college for the future. So we've got to adapt to both declining revenues and declining enrollments. Colleges across the country are seeing both. We're not alone. In fact, we've had less decline in enrollment than most institutions. I've talked to peers in other states. I was just at AACC, a conference. It was talked about. We're not the only state that's seeing this. We have to plan for how we're going to operate in the future, knowing that our state funding is likely to continue to decline and our enrollments may also decline, because as we keep raising tuition, less students can afford us. Okay? So we've got to plan for that. That means we really need to look at our existing programs, both academic programs and non-academic programs. And we need to make some tough decisions on some of those programs may have outlived their life. And we've also got to make room in our budget for unknown programs that will be needed in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We don't know what the jobs are going to be, but we have got to be able to meet our community's needs to prepare our students for whatever those jobs are that are coming along. We won't be able to do that if we don't make any room in our budget to allow for it. So we need to plan for that. And then we need to figure out, is there any way to get new revenues? That's really hard to do. So one of the things that we've talked about in here before, we continue to talk about with the board, is going out and asking our voters to increase our operating mill levy. That's about the only way we have identified so far to get substantial amounts of new money. We are looking at other things, but and boy, we're open to any suggestions on that. Many of you have brought ideas forward. On the surface, they almost always sound good, but when you think about how much they would cost to do and implement for a very minimal increase in revenue, we just have to be very careful about that. But these are our challenges. We've got to figure out how to deal with state funding, how to deal with building our reserves, how to structure ourselves for the future, and where are we going to get some new revenue. So here, let me give you some dollar amounts to look at here. And I'm going to focus on the 7% cut column to begin with. Should we get a 7% cut from the state, our state appropriation would be just over $8.9 million. For the current year, it's about $9.6 million. Okay. If we take that base budget that we've put together, which is what I said was last year's, this current year we're in's, final bar, plus those additions and less those deletions that we've taken out, we would end up with an instruction in general ending balance of just $83,124. By statute or rule, we have to have a 3% ending balance in our budget. So that means our ending balance needs to be just over $1 million. So based upon this estimate of state revenue and this base budget with those additions and subtractions, we're short over $919,000. If we're going to build our reserves to cover another half of a payroll, it's at least another $500,000. So what we really need to find is $1.4 million either in increased revenues or reduced expenditures to balance our budget. Now, based upon the actions of the board last night to increase tuition and fees, we have found $537,000 worth of new revenue. So that lowers the target number that we're looking for in cost reductions or other new revenue, and it'd be really hard to bring in much new revenue next year. We need to find over $880,000 worth of cuts in our budget. Okay? Now, some of the assumptions in here are that student credit hours don't go down any further than we projected. And I don't think we have to worry too much about our in-state and in-district students because we didn't raise them too much, just $1 here and $1 there. I did meet with the outgoing officers and the incoming officers of student government to discuss this, and they were very understanding of the increase. But we could lose some out-of-state students. We could lose some students that sign up for the fitness center. I don't think we'll lose too many from the fitness center because it's still a pretty good bargain to pay $100 for 4.5 months worth of access. You got to pay for one course, but to do that. So this is our challenge. If we were to assume that the cut is going to only be 5%, we still have a challenge of almost $700,000. Okay? What I am hoping to do as we finalize our budget and present a final budget to the board, I would really like to try to figure out, okay, let's make sure we cut at least 5%, and maybe we can figure out a way to have a 2% in our back pocket that is something we can decide not to do should things get better. And we'll talk about that one in a minute. But let me ask you, are there any questions on this page? This is the numbers. I kind of dwelled on this a little longer than I normally would. Okay. So this is the only thing that my team has been able to identify that we can consider for options now. We need to look at academic programs, and should some of them be closed? Even if you close an academic program, you have to teach it out. So, some closures would have some savings next year, some closures might not have savings until the following year or longer. We need to continue to look at non-academic programs. We've gotten pretty lean in that area over the last 4 or 5 years, and we could look at closing some of those programs. We could look at revamping them either by restructure, putting some kind of remediation plan in place to make sure they're doing better, have an improvement plan. Okay. We can do reductions in force, which means layoffs. And if we do layoffs, some of it would be linked to program closures, but there are others that we have identified as potential layoffs throughout the college, and we tend to look first, and don't want to scare anybody that's in this category, but we tend to look first at temporary employees, secondly at probationary employees, because we do follow the seniority process if we have to eliminate employees that are all in the same departments or categories. And then we can look at furloughs. I would have no appetite, and I know from talking to the board, and I have one of our board members has joined us. Thank you, Dr. Romero. We would not, if we do furloughs, we would not want to furlough those people who make less than $30,000 a year. It's just too much of an impact on their lives. So we would consider doing furloughs for those who make $30,000 and above. So if we did furloughs for those making $30,000 and above, the savings per day of furlough, which means a day without work and without pay, would be about $53,000 a day. Right now, we would like to avoid furloughs, but the furloughs would be the easiest thing to have in our back pocket as the variable cost, okay? Because furloughs could be announced, not mandated yet, could be stretched out over a year, and we could cancel the second half of the year should things get better. You can't cancel a layoff or a reduction in force as easy. So those are the things that we need to consider. I'm looking for recommendations back through the shared governance process from both Faculty Senate and Staff Senate. On some of those. We did a little bit of this in the fall, and I really didn't get any recommendations for cutting expenses in the fall. So we're going to talk about this at shared governance tomorrow and try to figure out a little bit of a process for how you can get recommendations back to myself and the executive team, because we're going to have to finalize some recommendations to present to the governing board on May 10th. We have decided to have a special meeting on May 10th to hopefully approve a budget for FY18. Okay? Now let me talk to you about, if I can use this computer right here. Also last night, where is that? There we go. Can you read those numbers? And how do you get this down out of the way? That one?
Yeah, that one should full screen it.
Ah, okay. That one. Okay. I'll scroll across. We're not get the whole thing up here. But what we've done is we've put together a spreadsheet to look at all of the academic programs. So these are all the credit-bearing programs. And so if you look over on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a program category, there's the major, and then there's the course prefix. In some areas, the course prefix is the program. In some cases, there are multiple course prefixes or departments that make up a program area, like allied health. Okay? And I'll just show you that we have all of them on here. So we got from A through W, accounting through welding. I'm going to go back to the top. Then what we've done is we've looked at outcome measures and financial measures, both for last academic year, fiscal year, and for this fiscal year. And then we've also looked at some 5-year averages. Some of this comes out during the program review process. Some of it comes out by just looking at data from each of those years. So I'm just going to scroll across the top here. And I'm going to go back to the very top, if I can figure out how to get up there. Okay, accounting. Let's see. I'm going to use accounting. I'm not picking on you. Where's Kathleen? I saw you somewhere. But anyway, and Francis is somewhere over here too, like Francis. But total enrollment in FY16 for accounting was 451 students. Enrollments, that's not individual students. If a student is enrolled in 3 accounting courses, they're counted 3 times. But every time you're an enrollee, you pay tuition based upon the credit hours there. So those 451 students in accounting courses in FY16 generated 1,645 SCHs, which is student credit hours. So that's the number of students times the credits in the course. Then we've gone in and seen and estimated, to best we can by pulling data straight out of the system, what revenue was generated from accounting students for our accounting courses in FY16. So that's tuition and fees. And then if there's a program area that has a special appropriation through the RPSB process, that revenue, because it's earmarked for that program, is in that revenue number. Then we went in and we've just straight out a banner. We have what was the cost for that program. Each one of these departments has a department code, ARG code, and what was the cost there. We did adjust the cost, though, if a chair's salary was in that department and they managed multiple department areas, then their chair cost was allocated amongst all the departments that they oversaw. And if they got a supplemental pay for doing the extra 6 weeks of between semesters in the summer, that just went to an instructional pool and is not accounted for in a departmental budget. So then we calculated a gain or loss for each of those departments. So for accounting, they had $97,000 plus in revenues and $135,000 in expenses. They had a loss of $37,000. You would expect every department in an academic program to have a loss, because tuition does not cover the cost of offering programs. We have a subsidy from the state as well as a subsidy from our local mill levy, okay? So we calculated the gain or loss. And then we converted that from just an actual gain or loss to a gain or loss per enrollee, okay? So you'll see some programs that have a really high loss, but when you factor in the number of students they serve, the loss per enrollee comes down drastically. A couple of good examples. This is going to be posted out on Jack or the link, so everybody can go and look at it and do their own review of this. But I'll just give you a couple examples. You know, Hyper, because the fitness center has lots of cost. It has a huge overall loss. We're addressing some of that by increasing the fitness center fee by $25. But when you divide it by the total number of people who register for classes over there, it drops way down. Same thing is true for nursing. Nursing is a very costly program to operate. So the loss is high when you look just at the revenues versus expenses. But when you look at it on a per enrollee basis, it drops way down. So this is what that one does. And then we did the same thing for FY17. You're going to see on the sheet that if something is highlighted in pink or red, depending on what your color looks like, they're in either the top 10 or bottom 10 for that measure. So it's a way to quickly eyeball which are the ones that have the least or the most loss per student or per enrollee. Okay. And we're not going to go through all that here. So we did the same thing for FY 2017. Now all we have for FY 2017, of course, is expenses through the date we put this together, which was early April. We are complete in terms of registering students and getting tuition for this fiscal year because summer school is in next fiscal year. But the expenses are going to continue to grow because we're still paying salaries, both full-time, adjunct, and we're still buying some supplies there. So same thing there for FY 2017. And then for the programs, we looked at over 5 year, what was the number of awards of 2-year certificates, of 1-year certificates, and of associate degrees. We looked at the 5-year average course fill rate. So if a course has 20 students, you know, what's the average fill rate? Is it 100%? Is it less than 100%? Is it more than 100%? What is the student success rate over the 5 years? So the success rate for those of you who aren't in academic programs is a C or higher, so C, B, or A. We looked at what percentage of the students are auditing the course and what percentage of the students have been withdrawing from courses in that department. And then for FY16, because we used we came up with what was the average cost per student credit hour and what was the average cost per award given to students. And those awards were ranked. So a less than a 1-year certificate was a 0.5. No, was a 0.3. Okay, a 1-year certificate was a 0.5, and give me the number. And 1. So it's a 2-year degree is counted as 1. If it was a less than a year certificate, it was a 0.3 and 0.6 for a more than 1-year certificate. Okay. So I'm going to encourage everybody to go out and look at this spreadsheet, and especially for those of you who are in academic areas, to talk and to discuss and get back to your governance group your thoughts on academic programs. The challenge is at Santa Fe Community College, we have very seldom closed down a program. Other schools do it on a regular basis. Times change. When you have financial challenges, you've got to make sure you're spending your money where it's most needed. And you also have to look at do you have students? We have programs with very few students. Maybe we could allocate those resources to another program that could take more students that's already here, or could be allocated to a new program that we don't know what it is. So I'm going to challenge all of you to think in those terms. And the hard part here, and this is the hard part from what I've had to do, unfortunately, too many times, is when you're thinking about programs or you're thinking about reductions in force, don't think about the people that are currently there. Think about the program and think about the students and the college and the community first. It will always come back to impacting people. But it's really hard to make decisions and recommendations when you think about people first. That sounds harsh, but I promise you, if you don't try to do that somewhat, you will never be able to get anywhere and to make a change that's going to help us make decisions to go towards the future. So, A lot of information, don't need to make decisions today, but let me open the floor for questions about this, and then I have some questions that did come in via email. So, Gerard?
What is the entire campus O&M per day cost?
I don't know. The question is, what is our operations and maintenance cost per day? We could figure that out because we have a budget in there. But, our operating budget is roughly $34 million. I can't remember the portion. I think it's less than 20% goes to plant operations and maintenance. 51% goes to instruction. Everything else is in the teens usually.
Part two to that would there be any consideration? I know we have the continuing ed on Saturday, but a complete campus shutdown in the future for Sundays and Mondays.
So that's one of the questions that came in on an email. It really doesn't save us any money. Closing down any day other than maybe on the weekends doesn't save us money. We looked at closing the fitness center on Saturdays. It would make a lot of people angry. It would only save us $37,000 a year. Okay? So some things don't add up, or don't add up as much as you would like them to. When we closed down on Fridays a few years ago in the summertime, it didn't save us any money because we were still open on Saturday and Sundays for the fitness center and some programs, and we turned the air conditioning down, and then we had to spend a lot of money to cool the buildings back down, and all of us were pretty unhappy on Monday for most of the day. So we didn't save any money. A lot of the public schools, and this is what's different, a lot of the public schools are going to 4-day weeks. But where they're saving money is on transportation for buses. So they're only transporting the school kids 4 days a week instead of 5. And they're not paying people who work in the cafeteria and people who clean the buildings. The teachers are still getting their full salary and having to cover everything, maybe with a longer day, Monday through Thursday. So there are the savings there. For us, our classes are Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, sometimes 1 day a week. So when we've looked at it, we have not seen savings by closing, even on the weekends, just during the summertime. Okay? Other questions or comments? Yeah, Laura?
So this covers 2 years.
2 years.
And I'm wondering if it would make sense to look at a little bit of a longer period to get a better picture. I mean, a program review is at least 3 years.
Correct.
And I know in some areas, areas have been pressured to lower the number of courses they offer for budgetary reasons or for whatever. So the drop in enrollment may be reflecting things that we have known that were done, for reasons like that.
Right. I'll go back and we'll look and see how hard it would be to add another year or two before that. We do have 5-year numbers in there in terms of the awards and success rates and so forth. We don't on the financials. We could look at some of that, especially maybe if we narrow it down to some programs that we think need to be looked at. One of the things to think about for this is you don't necessarily have to totally close the program down. You could move it to non-credit. Now, non-credit programs have to cover their own cost. But right now, our choice really is keeping something, cutting it back, closing it, or consider moving it to non-credit. And there could be blends of all of those. It could be some classes. I'll just give you for an example. Right now in fine woodworking, because almost all the classes that were being, I hope I'm right in this, all the classes that were being scheduled for this summer were not required in a degree. We've canceled most of those classes, but we're going to be adding them in non-credit over the summer. Now, it's going to cost those students more because the state does not subsidize non-credit. But we're going to offer it. And many of the people who are going to take those courses, it really doesn't matter if they pay $5 a credit hour or they pay $100 for the course. I just picked a number that was easy to come up with.
Just for clarification, it's multiple sections of one course, the
Okay.
project,
Okay, so
which does count as an elective, but we had 7 sections, and we
So we had multiple sections, but it was a course that was an elective,
Yes.
not a required course. That's one of the things with our scheduling task force that we're looking at. We have got to consider maybe we're offering too many types of courses. And we all know from Achieving the Dream and other ideas that students don't do optional, so let's don't give them so many options. And so we just need to look at all those things. Other questions, comments? Yeah.
Can you define furlough? What happens to benefits during that period?
Furlough is a day without pay. So it's a cut in pay without being spread over the year. So you don't work on that day. So your benefits are impacted, not your health care benefits because they're based on a month-to-month basis. It would only be your retirement pay. So you would pay less, a smaller percentage to the state retirement, and the college would also pay less. And then there's the FICA and the other ones that would be a little bit less, but health benefits would not be affected. Marcy?
Is that the same answer for faculty? How would furlough work for faculty?
So if we furlough faculty, we would do like we did when we had the financial stability plan. We would probably do it before the semester starts and have the report date be day 2 later, how many ever the furlough days are.
Does that make you a pay cut?
Yes, it would be a pay cut.
So it's
Yep.
not really a furlough as much as it's like a pay cut.
But here's the difference. In a pay cut, you have to work, but you're making less money. On a furlough, you don't work, but you get the pay cut. Now, if we do furloughs, if we do furloughs, and I gave everybody a little bit of that option the last time around because we took a pay cut and then I gave everybody I think 2 days, administrative days with pay that you could take throughout the year. I couldn't give that to faculty, so that's why we had the late report date for that January that we did that. But for my executive team, though, if we go to furloughs, my executive team will be working. They will not get furloughed. They will take a pay cut equal to the furlough amount. So, but they will be expected to work because in tough times, the senior management team needs to be here. Okay. Other questions? Subi?
In the event of a furlough, is there any way that the reduction in pay could be spread over more than one pay period so people don't have to take the whole hit in a single pay period?
It depends how we define the furlough. If we were to do furloughs, the most that I can anticipate right now, and right now we're not recommending them, so don't run out of the room panicked yet. But the most I'm anticipating might be 4 days for the whole year, with 2 in the first 6 months and 2 in the second 6 months. And for everybody but faculty, you would work with your supervisor to plan a furlough day. I would encourage people to take a Friday or Monday and have a long weekend. But we got to keep the operations going, so they would be staggered. For faculty, it would just be we would report on a Monday instead of a Thursday. So you get 2 extra days in the summer break. If we did that, and the reason I kind of like that is, number one, even if we had to do it for the fall, I could cancel the spring if the budget looks better. I can't cancel when we've already laid somebody off and the job is empty. So anyway. But a furlough, just to repeat, a furlough is a day off without pay. So it is a cut in salary. It does not affect your health benefits if you're on the benefit program. Okay? Anybody else? We got about 8 minutes because there's going to be a second group of people come in. Yeah. Rebecca.
Randy, when will we, or where will we have access to these spreadsheets?
We're going to send out a link. It's either going to be posted on Jack or we're going to send a link out to this. So the presentation will also be out there on Jack. Okay. Yeah. Catherine.
I sent you a question via email, but you may not have read it.
Yeah, I've got a stack here, but I need to go back to them.
As department chair, we're being asked to work on our spring 2018 schedule a year before. Actually, it was due last week. What do we need to put into consideration as we work that? So, for example, for the summer and the fall schedule right now, we had put what we thought was an adequate number of sections, but then we had to reduce the number of sections with the idea that if we had more students, we could add additional sections possibly.
add more like we're doing now, or just roll the spring 2017 over with the number of sections we have.
I would rather you do the minimum you think you need. And of course, with our scheduling project, that's going to help us figure out the classes that need to be offered. I'd rather offer fewer and add classes when they fill up. Otherwise, we get people spread over a bunch of sections, and instead of having 4 full classes, we got 6 half full.
So tied in with that. So in my department, that'll be fairly easy because for many years we've done a manual wait list. So when students see that a section's full, they know to come to myself and Tricia Martinez.
Right.
We start a wait list, and when we hit 12 or higher, we go to Camilla and we ask for another section. But for other schools, departments where that isn't a common practice, I'm wondering if maybe we could go back and look at some of the features in Banner. And I'm on that Banner committee, we're even looking at what we're not using in Banner, that's part of it. And do some type of wait list, but the wait list not being so much, in 24 hours this spot's yours, but more a way of students being able to see, we as chairs, being able to see this many students tried to get into this class and couldn't, so that we could open another section, because
Right.
we're impacting their graduation
Right.
rate otherwise.
So I need to work with the Banner folks in registration. Every time we've tried to do that, there's been some hiccup. We may be making better use of Banner now. Maybe we can turn on that feature. So that is something, Margaret, I do want to look into that feature to see if we're at the point now where we can turn it back on. So that is something we have always wanted to do. So we will keep looking at that. A couple other questions that came up. There were 2 jobs posted recently for Northern and Southern New Mexico procurement advisors. Who funds these positions? These are grant-funded positions. They are employees of Santa Fe Community College in our procurement and technical assistance program. They are fully funded by, it's an appropriation, but it's really a grant from the state and a federal grant that matches those. So we are closely scrutinizing every position request. And if we don't need to hire a position, we're going to wait, delay it, not fill it for a while. There are some that have to be filled. There are some that are on grants, and so we have to fill those. So if they're grant funded, we're going to post them. Okay? So most of the ones you've seen lately have been grant funded. You may see a few more related to some restructuring that we're doing, that we're allowing some postings for some internal candidates to apply for positions. That's still going to save us money, because when we restructure, it's usually because somebody left, and instead of hiring that person, we're redistributing the duties, and sometimes we have to go ahead and post those jobs. But the procurement advisor positions are grant funded. That one came up.
Are you looking at any of the education or fitness benefits?
You mean for staff?
Yes.
No. Not at this time. We're trying not to do anything to impact the benefits that we provide to the employees. Okay, some of them don't cost us. It doesn't cost us for you to go use the fitness center.
Because we're getting stressed out.
It's supposed to save us money because you're supposed to be in better shape and happier at work. I'm not sure if it's all working. Okay.
It is working well.
A couple other questions. One related to keeping offices. It's not all offices open till 6 Monday through Thursday. I just came back from a conference, and one of the presenters talked about, and they have even more nighttime students than we do, and they have a lot of classes that start at 7. And they keep their offices open till 9, until the students leave. I know there are times when there's not a whole lot of people that come to your office areas between 5 and 6, but if we keep one student happy, or we got one student who gets out of here and gets served because they can't get out here before 5 o'clock, or they come running in. I see them every day because I'm up the front. I see people every day, especially before we started keeping the cashier's office open late. At 5 after 5, we could have collected a lot of money because they can't get here by 5 o'clock. They got jobs. So keeping the offices open Monday through Thursday till 6, to me, makes sense as a customer service project. We could consider not doing it between semesters, but once again, between semesters, people are enrolling. And so it's really much easier to just have a consistent schedule year-round. And we haven't announced it yet, but this summer, just as we've done for the last 2 summers, I don't mind if people go to the 410 schedule. The college, though, is open on Fridays, so we have to have coverage Monday through Friday, including those who normally work on Saturdays. But if for the months of June and July, you can do reschedule people so that they work 410s or do some very schedule. We cannot do it so that somebody gets paid overtime because you change your schedule more than 40 hours in a 1 week. But that's up to each area to work. But we have to have coverage in all the programs Monday through Friday. Okay? Yep. Laura? Are not being filled?
Yeah, you mentioned that there's 7 full-time faculty positions where people are retired.
No, there's 1.75 faculty positions. There's 7 total positions. It's 1 3/4 FTE faculty and 4.5 staff. And those positions, one has been vacant since December, and one has told us they're retiring. I don't know if they've told everybody else. I'm not going to name their name, because some people don't want everybody to know they're retiring until it's time.
So it's 1 full-time faculty.
There's 1 full-time faculty that's currently teaching and 1 who retired in December that didn't get replaced this semester. So we're going to freeze those positions. Okay? For those of you who are in those departments, you know who I'm talking about. Okay. All right, well, look for the email or the link to where this will be posted. And thank you, everybody, and we'll make room for the next group that's coming in.